Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. Happy to be here with you today. Thank you. Folks, it's been a wild ride. There's just so much that's going on. As we have seen now out in the news, it is official. H.R. 133 has been passed. Now, I know you're wondering, what's H.R. 133? It's the United States-Mexico Economic Partnership Act. Aren't you happy? That passed. H.R. 133, a bill from 2019, passed, and everyone is happy. Of course, you may be wondering what I'm talking about. Well, we're going to explain, because not quite everyone is happy, and you deserve to know more. Now, before I start with that, let us also mention, if it's the first time you've been here, we on No Soundbites Allowed do long-form political commentary on the various issues that affect us from the local to the national and international level. On every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. It's normally broadcast on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook simultaneously, as long as the internet overlords allow it to go out. And you can even call into the program. We look forward to you joining us every Sunday talking about what you think are the important issues that are affecting America. So, besides that celebration of our First Amendment rights, let's get into this. What's H.R. 133? You deserve to know this because I've been looking yesterday and today. No one is talking about this. No one is really explaining what's going on. Can I say this? You've heard a lot about the fact that you're going to get a $600 check. You've heard a lot that people who are unemployed, the 6.7% and growing, nearly 7% of America that is unemployed, are going to get $300 bonus checks for 11 weeks. You've been told that for all the businesses that are desperately hanging on by their fingernails, as governors like Andrew Cuomo and Newsom out of California, Whitmer out of Michigan, have been destroying businesses across the nation through executive powers because of COVID-19, that the federal government, Congress, has come together and put out a bill to help save those businesses, theoretically, months after the fact. As we've already discussed yesterday, we already know that some 52% of black-owned businesses are gone already. That was back in August. We know that we have seen some 1 in 5 businesses across the nation have already closed before we got through the summer. And we know that if there are further lockdowns to come, as has been indicated by the COVID advisor for Joe Biden, a 6-week lockdown, an additional 40 to 60% of all businesses in the nation will cease to exist. But don't worry, because we've been told by Congress and the news media that everything's okay. We have a new stimulus. You're going to get a $600 check, and those businesses may get some loans, and everything will be okay. Let's really understand what's going on here, though, because out of $2.3 trillion, $900 billion is being spent on COVID relief. What about the rest of the money? What about the $1.4 trillion no one is talking about? And why was that money, $1.4 trillion, spent in other places besides you, the American people? Well, we wanted to find out, so we've been looking through and trying to figure it out. So let's get into this. H.R. 133 is the COVID relief bill, which makes no sense. Except that's how Congress operates. Instead of creating a new bill that would have to go through the process, allow the American people to see it, and see who's introducing it, it was completely avoided. Instead, they attached it to this bill that was essentially dead. Now, according to GovTrack, as we can see, H.R. 133 was the United States-Mexico Economic Partnership Act. It was sponsored and was put out there by Henry Cuellar.
And he is a Democrat out of Texas. Just to let you know a little bit about this, he was opposed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Justice Democrats. In other words, the Democratic Socialists, a growing group in the Democratic Party. And he was opposed by them, and they tried to get him removed. He won by 51%. But the Democratic Socialists got 48%, which is a scary number. Henry Cuellar would go on to win in his Democratic race, or in the 2020 race, winning 58% versus his Republican candidate with 39% and the Libertarian with 2.7%. So what did Representative Cuellar, what did he actually put out there? Well, as you can see, he put a bill forth on January 3rd of 2019. And what he put out there was dead in the water. It had a 4% chance of being enacted, of getting through the House, of actually becoming a law. No one cared. It was dead. And then, at the end of the year, it finally goes through. In 2020, it passed the House, passed the Senate. There were a lot of rules that need to be changed. And suddenly, in December, it becomes an entirely different bill. This is why we have to pay attention to what's going on in our nation. This is why we need to be able to look up these bills, and why we are so always adamantly against the policy in major news media to never mention an actual bill. They never tell you what the bill number is. They never tell you what the name of the bill is, because they never want you to actually look it up. They don't want you to see what's actually being said and what's actually being done, and what amendments are being thrown on top of a bill that completely changes it. And this is a perfect example of that. This is a perfect example, because Henry Cuellar's bill is about the United States and Mexico. It has nothing to do with COVID relief. It has nothing to do with funding the entire nation, an appropriations bill, where we are funding everything that the United States government does. It had nothing to do with that. This H.R. 133 was not a $2.3 trillion bill. Not even close. But that's what it became, because it was the easiest way to do this without letting the American public actually see what was going on. And now Representative Cuellar has a wonderful little promotion for his 2022 race, saying he passed the bill that got COVID relief for the nation. It's kind of insidious what you see happening there. And that blocks off the Democratic Socialists and, of course, Republicans, and secures that seat for Democrats in Texas in 2022. There's a lot of reasons why things happen the way they do in our government. But the real question is, and what we're here about is, what's in the COVID relief bill? What is in H.R. 133? What does it actually say and do? Well, if you're looking at the major news media like NBC News, you will never find out, because the only thing they want to tell you is that it's a $900 billion corona relief bill, which isn't true. That's not what the bill is. When over half of the bill is dealing with something completely different, then you can't say it's something else. $1.4 trillion is being spent on everything but corona relief. Therefore, it's not a corona relief bill. There is an amendment in the bill that gives you corona relief, but that's not what it's about. And yes, it is less than the $3.3 trillion that Democrats had asked for, but that's really not important. What is it about? Because it's really, the main point of it is not jobless benefits. It's not about direct payments to you or the rental assistance. It's not about support for small businesses or COVID-19 relief or schools or transportation. That's what NBC News wants you to think, which is why at no point does NBC actually tell you what's in the bill. Now, I have to give them a little bit of credit here, or a little bit of a backup, because actually, until Monday afternoon, there was no amendment. There was no documentation for the public to read. This was all done by word of mouth, handshakes in the back rooms of Congress, in the Senate and the House of Representatives. There was no actual documentation for the public to be able to look at. In fact, yesterday when we came out with our announcement, there were barely a couple of hours before the vote happened, and the representatives had something to read. And what they had to read was a 5,000-page bill. Literally, literally over 5,000 pages to read through before they had to vote. Now, that's incredible. That's ridiculous. No one can read through that much information by themselves in the amount of time that was necessary. But we did go through parts of it yesterday in our article, in our video, What's in the Bill? You May Be Surprised. Because we did find out some of the things that were in the bill. Things like, as we see here, the national intelligence agencies trying to find a study, finding out if they can pay off student loans to keep their employees in place. Or another bill that was out there where they were trying to finally fund the changes in the Benghazi recommendations. Remember Benghazi in 2012? An ambassador and 3 Americans were killed because no one in the State Department actually bothered to upgrade the security protocols. And after massive review, it was found that there were several things that need to be implemented to allow our ambassadors, our embassies to be protected. And it seems, according to HR 133, we still haven't finished getting that done. That's a problem. And that's a problem not only because we haven't done it, but other nations in the world, like Iran, who hate America and want death to all Americans and are the leader of global terror, are reading that document and realizing some of our embassies are not protected well enough. That's a terrifying thought. That's in the bill, not that you were told about it. Not that NBC, CBS, MSNBC, not even Fox News, the mainstream media doesn't want to tell you that our embassies are not as protected as they should be. That a lot of problems exist right now. But some other people did look through not only the things that we found, like the fact that $845 million is being spent by the United States government to run the government of Jordan, the country of Jordan. Why? No explanation. We're spending $845 million on running the country of Jordan. And as bad as that is, other people found even more things that were wrong with it. Like in terms of the domestic funding on the COVID relief bill. This is how it's been touted. In the COVID relief bill, we're spending $26 million on the Kennedy Center. We're spending $1 billion on the Smithsonian. We're spending $154 million on the National Art Gallery. $167 million on the National Art and Humanities. The Woodrow Wilson Center is getting $14 million. Okay, what does any of that have to do with coronavirus or coronavirus relief? How is that helping to save tens of thousands of businesses that are on the line about to fail? That we have seen consistently being said since June of this year, that we have businesses that are failing every day. In fact, as we looked at it yesterday in one of our videos, we were able to see somewhere between 800 and 1,500 businesses are closing forever day by day. And the coronavirus bill is spending money on the National Art Gallery, the Smithsonian. How many jobs are being protected there? But that doesn't end it. H.R. 133, the supposed coronavirus relief bill, spends $1.3 billion on Egypt, $700 million on the Sudan, $453 million on the Ukraine, $130 million on Nepal, $135 million on Burma, $85 million on Cambodia, $25 million in Pakistan. By the way, we saw Pakistan. And yes, $15 million is being spent to increase democracy in Pakistan. Okay, increasing democracy and hopefully peace in the world is a great thing. Is that worth $15 million? That's debatable. But let's say we go with the full $15 million there. There's $10 million that's being spent on gender programs. We saw this in a video yesterday. We presented it to you. $10 million on gender programs. Okay, I defy you. Tell me, what does gender programs mean? How do gender programs, whatever that may be, help to improve the stability of Pakistan and improve peace in the world? What is a gender program? Really, what does that mean? And why are we spending $10 million on that in Pakistan? What is the point? I don't understand it. Is that not wasteful? How many businesses could be saved in the United States? Well, we actually know. We figured it out. Somewhere between 1,800 and 18,000 U.S. businesses could be saved just from what we saw yesterday, not including the additional things that are being highlighted now by others that have searched through H.R. 133 and tried to find out where's the money really going. And by the way, the American people are getting all of $600. $600. And there's $1.4 billion spent on the Asia RIA. By the way, people wonder, what is that? Well, according to the executive order, January 21st, 2011, from President Obama, it's a regulation. It's about regulations of trade in Asia. That's it. It is the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs are to put together a preliminary plan consistent with law under which agency will periodically review regulations determining whether such regulations should be modified, streamlined, expanded, or repealed so as to make the agency's regulatory program more effective or less burdensome to achieve regulatory objectives. The Asia RIA, which we are spending $1.4 billion, is a bureaucratic paper shuffling program. It is a study and plan of regulations on trade in Asia, and it costs us $1.4 billion. Do you know how many businesses in the United States could be saved with $1.4 billion? It's a terrible thing. So we have to say to ourselves, and as we said in the video, in the title, who has the balls to stand up to this? Who is willing to say that spending $1.4 trillion on running the government of Jordan and getting gender programs into Pakistan and spending $1 billion on the Smithsonian is not the focus we should have when our economy is crumbling? Businesses, up to 1,500, possibly more businesses are closing every day, and people are being put out of work permanently because there is no job to go back to. Who voted against it? Because we know that all day, December 21st, members of Congress and the Senate came out and had their little speeches telling us how wonderful they are, how they have done such a great job spending 6 months to finally pass this bill. And let's be honest, the only reason the bill wasn't passed before December is because the 2020 election. Now, whether it was Democrats trying to prop up Joe Biden and deny President Trump the ability to say he had a win and he was protecting the American people with funding for COVID relief when it was needed back in June, or whether it's from Republicans who are out there saying we're not going to give the Democrats a win and Joe Biden a win because the 2020 election is vital. Regardless of that, today, both sides came out saying how great they were to come together and get $600 for the American people, ignoring the fact that $1.4 trillion is being spent wastefully across the rest of the world. Well, who actually said no to this? Who actually called this out? And the answer is in the House of Representatives, 53 members. 359 members actually came out and said, yes, they wanted this. And they wanted this because COVID relief, not because of the 1.4 trillion being spent wastefully on bureaucratic meaninglessness. No, they voted for it because we got a check to you, because we gave you a $600 check. And 53 people said, wait a minute, this is the wrong priorities. This is not helping America overall. We've spent, if we're going to spend this much money, we're going to go this far in debt, perhaps we should be spending money on the American people first. If we're going to go $30 billion in debt, and we are, then why not spend that money on the American people? Of course, it's rather insulting that 17 people wouldn't even say yes or no. They just didn't want to be involved. They just skipped it. Now, of the people who said no, a couple of names that stand out that are rather important. Justin Amash, who is an independent. Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat, came out against this bill. And believe it or not, Rashida Tlaib, a Democratic Socialist, Rashida Tlaib actually was against this bill, the COVID relief bill, the $1.4 trillion in wasteful spending across the world. She's actually against it. I mean, that's amazing. We're talking about the same people like Andrew Yang and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who believe that debt spending and spending money you don't have is perfectly okay. You can just print money forever and it won't matter. And Rashida Tlaib, one of her backers, part of that Democratic Socialists of America, she actually opposed it. Shocking. And of course, we had Thomas Massie, who was involved and said that he was against this. Gohmert was against it, Representative Gohmert. But there are a few others. What about in the Senate? On H.R. 133, the United States-Mexico Economic Partnership Act, which has turned into a appropriations bill, a funding for the United States government, and a COVID relief bill tacked on. Actually, 6 people said no. Senator Marsha Blackburn, Senator Ted Cruz, of course, Rand Paul. Now, what did some of these guys say? And also Dr. Paul Gosar pointed out and had to say, the whole package is a sellout. I'm voting no. Dozens of problems, 5,500 pages long, and 2 hours to review before the vote. This is nonsense. Gee, you'd think he might know what he's talking about there. That this isn't really focused on coronavirus and helping the American people. How about, let's look at Justin Amash, who said, They passed 5,593 pages that they didn't read. America, stop letting this happen. Don't vote for anyone who voted for this. It's not okay. Representative government is important. Too many people have come to accept oligarchy. This doesn't end well. By the way, I want to just mention, he's not wrong. This isn't the first time this has happened. Think about the Obamacare bill, the Affordable Care Act, which was passed in 2010, which no one read. No one read. And in fact, Democrats were very proud to say they didn't read it. They just passed it. We are seeing these massive bills, thousands and thousands of pages long, that no one knows what's in it. No one read this. I doubt if anyone, whether it be Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer, knows that we have a study to figure out whether or not a national park should be created at the site of the 1908 race riots. How about we don't know what $10 million is being spent in Pakistan on gender programs? I bet if you ask Nancy Pelosi what that is, she has no idea. If you ask Chuck Schumer, he has no idea. If you ask Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she has no idea. They don't know, but they voted for the bill. They said, yes, we're going to spend this money, your money, and not on you, but on these other foreign nations. I would love to hear any of them. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, yes, Mitch McConnell, the other Democrats. I want to hear them say and explain, why are we spending $845 million on the government of Jordan when I can look right down my block and I can see the local laundromat is closed forever? It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. When I can look, and one of the larger companies in my area, Maine's, with over 400 employees, are just gone. It doesn't exist anymore. When I can see that there are restaurants and diners all across the southern tier, central New York, dozens, literally dozens, are closing forever, or have already closed forever and will never come back, taking with them not only those business owners, but all of the jobs that go with them, and starting a domino effect of these. This is money that's not going into the economy, causing other businesses to close as well. This is a problem. This is a big problem. So let's look at, Justin Amash was one of those who said something, but what about Senator Rand Paul, who we have video of as he was speaking on the floor of the Senate? And one of the things I want to highlight here is when he said, this is a deficit-busting bill. It will be 5,593 pages long. If it's 250 words per page, then that's 1,398,250 words in this bill. If Congress people read at the rate, the American average of 300 words per minute, which is a big assumption since we consistently see members of Congress don't read the bills they vote on, then a congressman might read this in 4,660 minutes. Or in other words, to read this bill, to read H.R. 133, which is the United States-Mexico Economic Partnership Act that had a 4% chance of ever being passed before it became co-opted and turned into this insanity. If you were to actually read this, it would take 77.68 hours. 77 6.68 hours. Do you know how many days that is? Think about it. How many days is that? 3.5 days? That's ridiculous. And that's assuming that you took no breaks. If you did nothing but sit and read this bill from the beginning to the end, everything in there. And that also doesn't mean that you will understand a single word of what's being said, because it's filled with legal gibberish. I was looking up there is a advisory council in there. When you're searching, if you search for the word, how many times the word advisory shows up, or the word council shows up, or God forbid you search under security, do you know how many hundreds of times those words, thousands of times those words appear in sentences, in paragraphs that make absolutely no sense, that are just legal wording? And this is what they voted for. They don't know what's in this bill. You don't know what's in this bill. And I can tell you for a fact, NBC doesn't know what's in this bill. They don't know. They are so misguided, and they are misguiding the public because they're telling you what's in they think it's a COVID relief bill. More than half of all the money spent in this has nothing to do with COVID. But let's go on. Thomas Massie, who voted against the bill, said, reminder, the House has a rule to give everyone 72 hours to read the bills. Every Democrat in the House voted to suspend that rule, and that's why we're voting on a 5,500 plus page bill tonight with less than 8 hours to read it. Again, this is a bill that takes over 3 days to read if you didn't stop. And they just said, nope, that's okay. We're just going to vote on it. Don't worry. It's about COVID. We're going to give $600 to every American. Aren't we great? Oh, we're paying for Jordan? Oh, we're paying $1 billion to the Smithsonian? Don't worry about that. How many businesses could we save in America for $1 billion? How many people who are going to be evicted on January 31st, how many people's homes could we save? How many families could we keep in homes with $1 billion? When the average cost per month for a rental is $2,000, how many Americans could we save with that? I mean, let's think about that. The Kennedy Center, Smithsonian, National Arts and Gallery. Okay, let's say we keep all of the domestic spending. We'll look at the foreign countries. 1.3 for Egypt, 1.3 billion for Egypt, 700,000 for Sudan, 453 million for Ukraine, 130 million for Nepal, 135 million for Burma. Do you even know where Burma is? Honestly, I would love to see someone put a map in front of, I don't know, Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand, Anthony Brindisi. Put a map in front of them and say, point out just a regular map of the world and say, show me without the lines, without the names of the countries there, show me where Burma is. Please. Show me where Burma is. Tell me how many people live in Burma. Can you guess? Do you have any idea whatsoever? Because we're spending $135 million there. And let's assume that half the money that's being spent actually has a good purpose. Let's assume that. It's still billions of dollars that could be going to save moms and dads and kids that are going to be kicked out of their homes on February 1st because of evictions. That is hundreds, if not tens of thousands of businesses like the ones in my neighborhood, the local laundromat, that have closed forever that could be reopened. And I keep focusing on that laundromat because we're not talking about just a business. It's not about how much money did that laundromat owner make. That's a service to our community that hundreds of people were using. That's revenue for my city to help pay for, I don't know, a Section 8 housing, for people being fed, for all the needs in our community. That came out of both the taxes on that property and the revenues that he made while providing a service for people who don't have washers and dryers and need clean clothes. This is what they shut down. This is what they are not funding. Instead, they're helping give $135 million to Burma, a place most Americans don't know exists, and that almost all Americans, over 95% of Americans, I believe, I'm guessing here, but I believe it's pretty safe to say that 95% of Americans couldn't find it on a map if you paid them, and you couldn't guess at the number of people in that country. But to be fair, and let me continue, because there was a Democrat who voted against this. It's Tulsi Gabbard. And Tulsi said, $600 is a slap in the face to every American struggling due to the pandemic. You deserve better. I voted against the 5,593-page spending bill that gave billions to corporate interests, the military-industrial complex, and other countries, leaving crumbs for you who need help most. Now, I don't entirely agree with what Tulsi Gabbard said there. I do think our military is important. But yeah, and the billions to corporate, well, let's be honest here. They may be spending money on Amazon and Walmart, but they're shutting down mom and pops left and right. Mom and pops aren't getting billions. They're not even getting real help. Because if we were serious about helping keep the American economy alive, if we were serious about reducing the amount of unemployment, if we were looking at trying to help people not starve, we would be trying to preserve those small businesses because they're the engine. How many times have you heard Obama, everyone say that small businesses are the engine of the growth of the American economy? That 70% of jobs come from small businesses. And we're letting them die on the vine at a rate of somewhere around 1,500 per day. And instead of helping them, we're helping Burma. Now, it is possible this may all change. Because, as has been reported early this morning, at 2:20 this morning, and it's currently 8 o'clock, we see that the Hill mentioned that there may be a veto by President Trump, that President Trump could stop this bill, and it would require the Senate and the House to come back and override this, to have more than enough votes to go through. And they could get that. They do have the votes, but that they would have to override the veto. And this would be the first time that a veto by President Trump would be stopped. He's done it 8 times before, and each time the House and the Senate were not able to stop it. Again, as they mentioned, Trump has issued 8 vetoes during his tenure, none of which have been successfully overridden. But this could be the first. Now, the reason why President Trump is saying that he wants to veto this is because of China. It's because of renaming military bases, which I don't think that's the weakest answer. But he says, and his statement is, I quote, "I will veto the defense bill, which will make China very unhappy. China, they love it, must have Section 230 termination. Protect our national monuments and allow for removal of military from far away and very unappreciative lands. Thank you." Now, that's a bit of a difference between what the Hill is saying this was about, that it's about honoring Confederates, because that's not what President Trump said. As they quoted, it's about Section 230. It's about the internet overlords that are preventing and have prevented me successfully from being able to do live streams with you, for letting the American public talk with each other about issues and politics and preferences that the internet overlords, Mark Zuckerberg, James Dorsey, do not agree with. That they don't want you to have that conversation. They want to deny you your First Amendment rights. So he said it's about Section 230 and protecting free speech. He says it's about national monuments, whether you agree with that or not, and about allowing for our military to come home. Something that I know Rand Paul was mentioning about getting people out of Afghanistan. Finally, which will never happen. Much like we have bases in Germany right now, we have bases in Japan right now, bases in Italy right now. There is nowhere that America has ever had a war or fought a battle that we don't have a base and will have them forever. But we can reduce the numbers. We can reduce our numbers. So there could be a veto, and that would stop this process. And maybe if there is a veto, we could actually get a bill written by Congress under 5,000 pages that actually has the majority of its focus on coronavirus, the COVID-19 relief that they are touting, but isn't true. How about we spend $1.4 trillion on America and maybe $900 billion on the rest of the world? I'm not asking for everything. I'm not asking for some kind of miracle out of Congress. Just maybe focus on America first. Do you agree? Do you think I'm wrong? Should we celebrate the people who had the balls to stand up against the trend, to stand up against the crowd? The 53 representatives in the House of Representatives, the 6 senators in the Senate that stood up against the push by the major news media to lie to the American people. And this is lying to the American people, saying that this was about COVID relief, when it really, really isn't. The facts don't stand up to the propaganda. And the propaganda is being sold to you. Now, we look forward to hearing your comments to tell us, well, is it worth it? Is a $600 check worth what's being done around the world? What's being done to our economy? What's being done to our businesses? You may disagree with us in our opinion. You may think that the naysayers, that they don't have balls. We think they do. Of course, you are also invited to speak with us on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we do our live stream, and you're able to speak with us directly, even calling into the program. And if you have enjoyed this, if you found it to be informative, please subscribe. It helps to get the word out, to let more people see this and to have more of a discussion, because that is the best thing for America. That is our First Amendment right. And that's when America shines, when we speak with each other. So until then, we thank you. We look forward to seeing you at our next video, and you have a great day.